Have you ever felt kind of stuck? Like you should be further along in your life or your faith than you actually are? Well, we're about to dive into a passage from the New Testament book of Hebrews that hits this feeling head on. But here's the thing, it's not some gentle pat on the back. It's a really direct, challenging call to grow up. So we're going to break down exactly why this ancient text's mandate for maturity is so incredibly urgent, even for us today.
Okay, so this is the verse that really sets the stage. Just listen to the tone here. It's not a suggestion, right? It's a pretty sharp critique. Imagine you've been on a basketball team for years, and you should be the captain, but instead, the coach has to pull you aside to explain the rules of dribbling again. That's the vibe. This one verse just opens up a huge question that we're going to spend the rest of our time exploring. So, why the tough love? I mean, what's the big deal here? It turns out this isn't just about someone not knowing enough Bible verses. It's about something much deeper. It's about a fundamental expectation that was completely missed, an expectation that was tied directly to the passage of time. Let's start by digging into that first piece of the puzzle, the clock.
The very first clue is right there in the opening phrase. The author doesn't say, "You're not smart enough," or "You're too busy." The entire critique is framed around time. And that tells us something really important. From the perspective of the author, spiritual growth isn't just a random, wandering journey. It's expected to have a direction, and even a rough timeline.
That phrase, "by this time," is absolutely key. It creates a benchmark. The author's basically saying, hey, look at the calendar. Given how long you've been on this journey, you should be in a totally different place. This isn't about how fast you learn, it's about the fact that there's been almost no forward movement at all. It's the spiritual equivalent of a 20-year-old who still needs their parents to tie their shoes for them. A clear expectation for progress just wasn't met.
So let's put some real numbers to this to see how stark the contrast is. In his letter to the Galatians, the Apostle Paul mentions that he spent about 3 years getting his bearings after his conversion before he even went to meet the other apostles. 3 years. Now compare that to the people getting this letter in Hebrews. Scholars estimate they'd been believers for 15, maybe even 20 plus years. The author is looking at 2 decades and seeing a huge disconnect. If a few years is enough to get your foundation, 15 or 20 should be more than enough to be building something on top of it.
Okay, so we've established that time is a huge factor in this rebuke. But what about the other part? What does it actually mean to be a teacher? This is such a critical question because our modern idea of a teacher, someone with a degree standing in front of a classroom, might be completely different from what the author had in mind. And here's the detail that changes everything. This letter wasn't written to some special class of spiritual leaders. It was addressed to the entire community, to everyday people. This means that the expectation to become a teacher wasn't about getting a formal title or a paid position. No, it was about a function, a role that every single mature person in that community was expected to grow into.
Scholars like Tom Wadsworth and Frank Viola actually have a name for this. They call it the organic view of a teacher. The best way to think about it is like this. A teacher is simply someone who has graduated from the spiritual kids menu. They can handle the solid food, the deeper, more complex truths, and, crucially, they don't just consume it for themselves. They can actually explain it and share it in a way that helps everyone around them get stronger. They've made the shift from being just a consumer to being a provider within their community.
But here's the thing. Being a teacher in this organic sense isn't just about what you know in your head. It's about who you are. The New Testament is really clear on this. What you do should flow naturally from your character. So let's explore this idea of fruit over works and see how it's totally tied to this whole concept of maturity. This chart shows a really powerful contrast. On one side, you have dead works. Think of these as religious chores, things you do because you feel you have to. It's like a checklist. In fact, the author of Hebrews calls this stuff part of the milk diet, the absolute basics you're supposed to grow out of. But on the other side, you have the fruit of the Spirit. Things like love, joy, patience. You can't just try harder and produce these. They're a natural byproduct that grows out of a genuinely healthy spiritual life. One is about human effort. The other is about inner transformation. And right here, this is where it all clicks into place. The author of Hebrews says that mature people, the ones who can handle solid food, are those who have their powers of discernment trained by constant practice. Now, this isn't about being book smart or winning a theological debate. This is about having the deep, ingrained character to tell the difference between what's right and what's wrong, what's healthy and what's toxic, in the messy, gray areas of real life. Without that character, all the knowledge in the world is just noise.
Okay, let's pull all these pieces together. We've talked about time, we've talked about the function of a teacher, and we've talked about character. So now let's organize them into a single framework. Let's call it the maturity matrix.
It gives us a simple roadmap for the different stages of spiritual growth based on everything we've seen in Hebrews.
So let's walk through this matrix. First, you've got the babe stage. This is for the first few years, and the focus is all about getting your foundation, learning the basics, drinking milk. Totally healthy, totally necessary. But then there's this mourning zone, the stagnant believer. This is someone who, after 5 or more years, is still on that same milk diet. And the problem is, it's like spoiled milk now. It's not giving them the right nutrition to grow anymore. They're stuck being passive. The goal, of course, is the mature teacher stage. Here, after maybe 3 to 5 years, the focus totally shifts to building others up. The diet is solid food, and the activity is no longer just consuming, it's providing.
So, after all of this, what's the big takeaway? What's the bottom line? It's that spiritual maturity isn't some extra credit assignment for the super spiritual. According to the book of Hebrews, it's a core expectation. It's the standard. It's not just a suggestion, it's a mandate.
Look, this is a really tough pill to swallow, but it's the unavoidable conclusion. Staying a passive consumer, just taking things in year after year, isn't faithfulness. It's not humility. After a certain point, the author of Hebrews reframes it as what it is: spiritual laziness or sloth. It's a failure to grow up and step into the contributing role you were always meant to have.
And so, this ancient text leaves us with a very modern and very personal question. It forces us to look in the mirror at our own journey, our own role in our communities. Are we primarily consumers, always on the receiving end? Or have we grown to a place where we are now providers, offering real substance and edification to the people around us? According to the book of Hebrews, the answer to that question, well, it changes everything.